on the surface during the elections in Haryana, things seemed a certain way between the incumbent BJP and the Congress. The Congress seemed to be on the ascendant, the ruling BJP seemed to be on the defensive, and yet there were lots of things happening in a subterranean fashion which threw up a very different result on counting day. So what we've done at the Data Intelligence Unit is work on a set of 6 X factors which we believe can potentially impact the final outcome on the 23rd of November. And remember, Maharashtra is far more complex than Haryana, where there were only 2 key parties, the BJP and the Congress, and some smaller regional parties. Here you've got 6 parties, and there's no one party which is a pan-Maharashtra force. Therefore, there are 6 parties with limited capabilities, some strengths, some weaknesses, trying to capitalize on new opportunities, but facing significant threats. So, that being said, to back up this data analytics, we've got very strong voices from the ground. I want to start by introducing Rajdeep Sardesai, who's on a helicopter. I don't know if he's still flying in that helicopter, but it looks like a bit of a cockpit. So Rajdeep joins us. Sahil Joshi and his team have been out and about all across Maharashtra, leading our coverage on the ground. We've got Amitabh Tiwari, who we worked with on the analytics piece in this show that you're about to see. Sudhir Suryavanshi joins us, senior journalist, author of Checkmate. And I have Sheila Bhatt joining us as well, who's a well-known journalist. I want to take the first X factor. That's the battle between the Marathas and the OBCs. Remember, in Haryana, the BJP was able to ensure that there was a non-Jat consolidation, particularly amongst the OBC communities. Here, we're seeing, because of the Maratha reservation agitation, a sense that the Marathas were agitating against the government of the day, particularly Devendra Fadnavis and the BJP. And you've got the BJP attempting a non-Maratha, while they're trying to split the Maratha vote, they're trying to attempt a non-Maratha OBC consolidation. So what I'm going to do first up is show you a cross-tab of 2 data sets. The first comes from the CSDS post-poll Lok Sabha data set, and the second is the pre-poll data done by CSDS, which is an academic think tank which gives us a sense of how the political wind is potentially changing. What you're seeing on the screen is the lead that the Mahayuti, which is the NDA, has over the Mahavikas Aghadi, which is the India Alliance. So, in the Lok Sabha post-poll data, amongst the upper castes, for example, the NDA had a 20% vote share gap over the India Alliance. According to the latest data, that's now gone up to 45%, signaling a positive change in favor of the NDA to the magnitude of 25%. That's amongst the upper castes. Amongst the Marathas, during the Lok Sabha elections, the NDA had a 7% advantage over the India Alliance. That now, CSDS claims, has gone up in their poll to 18%, which is an 11% positive swing in favor of the Mahayuti. Amongst the OBCs, there was an 11% lead, lesser than amongst upper castes. That's now gone up to 16%, a 5% positive gain from the time of the Lok Sabha elections. Amongst the Dalits, the MVA was in the lead by 11%. Amongst the Adivasis, again, the MVA was in the lead to the extent of about 20%. And amongst the Muslims, the India Alliance was ahead by 62% over the Mahayuti, which is quite understandable. What's changed between the Lok Sabha and now is that the lead amongst Muslims is now 48%, which is still very substantial. The lead amongst Adivasis has gone up even further, from 20% to 30%. That's a 10% gain for the Mahavikas Aghadi. Whereas amongst the Dalits, earlier it seemed that the Mahavikas Aghadi was ahead in the Lok Sabha elections, but CSDS now thinks that the Mahayuti is ahead by 7%. So that being said, let me go to Rajdeep first. Rajdeep, on this point of whether on the ground you're seeing Maratha consolidation against the government, or has the NDA been able to split the Maratha vote in a way that while Jarange Patil and his tribe may be unhappy in the absence of Maratha reservation, they aren't so unhappy that they'll consolidate en masse against the NDA government of the day? What's your sense?
You know, Rahul, while you put these numbers, sorry to add a bit of skepticism, because as I travel around, I haven't seen such a hyper-local election in a very long time. You can go constituency by constituency and the winds will change depending on who the candidate is. Caste also is certainly a factor, especially in Marathwada, where, let's be honest, the Maratha reservation factor is still there. If there is any part of Maharashtra where I saw anything remotely like a cross-region narrative, it is in Marathwada, where Zarange Patil is a factor. And the young Marathas in particular will do whatever Zarange Patil wants. But remember, every party, even in Marathwada, has Maratha candidates. So everything in Maharashtra at the moment, Rahul, I sat with a friend this morning and we went constituency by constituency. 174 constituencies he pointed out, and he's been doing politics here for even longer than I have, showed that 174 constituencies, the candidate will matter. Not even the party label, depending on which candidate is able to attract his core set of voters, the local elites that these candidates represent. So then whether it's Marathas, whether it's Dalits, that doesn't seem to matter as much as it might in other states. I heard in Vidarbha a new term, which is ADMK for the Congress party, for example. Adivasis, Dalits, Muslims, and Kunbis, who are an influential OBC. On the other hand, you go to Marathwada, while you have a Maratha consolidation, that's where the BJP is also working towards an OBC consolidation. But the same logic doesn't work in Western Maharashtra or even in the Konkan where I am. So as you go region by region, even within the regions, there are huge discrepancies and differences. And remember, there are lots of rebels, lots of independents, some of whom can pull in 8,000-10,000 votes, enough to make all the difference between victory and defeat. Therefore, in this election, all this analysis may well have to take a reality check, simply because I have never seen, as I said at the very outset, Rahul, such a hyper-localized election where eventually management will probably matter more than the mahal that you're able to create.
Let Amitabh Tiwari respond to it, because Amitabh, what you were trying to do was to try and do a cross-tab between Lok Sabha post-poll data and Assembly pre-poll data to try and delve into how the castes and communities were likely to move. And Rajdeep there saying Maharashtra is too fractured a state at this moment, where just the significance of local level candidates, he mentioned 174 seats, and the fact that you've got so many dynamics in every seat, that those local dynamics may ultimately play a bigger role in determining the end result than the zoomed out pan-state dynamics.
No, of course, whenever we have discussed Maharashtra, we have discussed that even this leads and trails, caste-wise and community-wise, will need to be looked at region-wise, because what we are seeing is that in Marathas, the Mahayuti was actually leading, while in Marathwada, it might be trailing by a significant margin, and that's why we had that sort of a result. However, having said that, there is no overarching thing in this election. It's a seat-by-seat election. Rajdeep ji mentioned about 174 seats. I'm telling you, there are 60% seats, there are rebels. I mean, there are candidates who have earlier been MLA or have contested and have openly rebelled against the official nominee of the party. So there are rebels, not 40, 50, but more than 150 seats, there are rebels of some kind or another. So it's going to be micromanagement for sure. However, the level of intensity of the Maratha agitation compared to the Lok Sabha election, in my opinion, has declined, and that is because of the conflicting and contradictory positions which Manoj Jarange Patil has taken over the last 6 months. That's number one. Number two, as a counter to that, because the OBCs realized that there was a significant setback in the Lok Sabha, the counter OBC consolidation is higher. So that's why this gap is higher. The Maratha consolidation is reducing and the OBC consolidation is increasing.
Those are important points. Sahil Joshi, you've been traveling across the state. What's your net sense after all the interviews, the interactions, the speaking to voters on the ground across the state? What's your net sense? Who's going into polling day with the stronger ground game, with more momentum behind their tails?
When we were going for the campaign for the assembly elections, the things were pretty clear because there was a particular set of narrative which was already in place. But after the Ladki Bahim Yojana, at least the government had the counter narrative to what was set in during the Lok Sabha election. So, they bombarded the Maharashtra electorates with the advertisements, the whole campaign by all the three parties. In fact, separate campaigns, but they bombarded it with that, and because of that now the situation has come where the voters will have to think in a completely different way altogether. You can't depend on the narrative which was set during the Lok Sabha elections. But I somewhat agree with what Rajdeep was saying. I'm just giving you one example of a seat. The seat where right now I am at, which is called a Sangola seat. There is a rebellion within the Mahavikas Aghadi, and the candidate is from the PWP, a smaller party, the left-leaning Peasants and Workers Party. So now there is a triangular fight here because there is a Mahayuti candidate from Shiv Sena, there is a Mahavikas Aghadi candidate from Shiv Sena UBT, and this candidate is from the PWP. Now both the candidates, Mahayuti and Mahavikas Aghadi, are from the Maratha community, whereas the candidate from PWP is from a Dhangar community, which is OBC community. So if the vote split between the Marathas, the Dhangar will get a chance, and then he will decide whether to swing towards Mahayuti or the Mahavikas Aghadi, and that is what is going to develop in many of the cases across Western Maharashtra, Marathwada and Vidarbha region as well. So that's why this fight becomes very interesting. The only point which Mahayuti can bank on at this point of time is that at least they had some kind of a counter narrative so that their workers, when they're going to ask for the votes, they are equipped with some kind of a narrative in their hand that now their government in last 3 months have delivered the schemes which the voter would like to have, like a direct transfer of 1,500 rupees, the 3 cylinders, and rest of the other schemes as well. But this fight, rather than Maratha versus OBC, because Maharashtra, the OBC consolidation doesn't happen because there is no dominant OBC caste in Maharashtra the way it is in UP or the way it is in Bihar. So that consolidation doesn't happen. There are groups and subgroups within the OBC communities. It's just like Rajasthan, where there is no particular OBC community which is dominant across the state, and that is why this OBC consolidation doesn't work. Otherwise, in Lok Sabha elections in the Marathwada region, BJP would have had a chance because BJP tried to play the narrative that jo OBC ki baat karega, wahi desh pe raj karega, but it didn't work. If it would have worked then, it will not work now. So now it will be completely election management and the local fights which will give some kind of a chance for Mahayuti to be in the fight, and if possible, because of the rebels and better election management, if they can, have a chance to pass the Mahavikas Aghadi tally and then subsequently claim to form the government. So that is how it is going to be really.
So I want to come to the second X factor, which is to do with the ability to transfer votes. Remember, take for example the Mahayuti. The vote bank of the Ajit Pawar faction of the NCP is quite different from the vote bank of the BJP and the Eknath Shinde Sena, and therefore can Ajit Pawar transfer his votes? Remember, when we interviewed him over the weekend, he was already seeming reluctant with slogans like "Batenge to Katenge." It didn't seem to be up his alley, and therefore he had a certain aversion to those kind of slogans because he was hoping to carry some of the Muslim votes which had gone in favor of the United NCP. So therefore, the second big X factor is who can transfer votes from one alliance partner to the other. Rajdeep, there was a lot of talk about this during the Lok Sabha elections about whether the BJP will be able to transfer votes to Eknath Shinde Sena and vice versa. This on the question of ability to transfer votes from individual parties to candidates not belonging to those parties but part of that alliance. What's your sense of who has the greater ability to be able to achieve that?
Rahul, that's a great question because I think that is one of the key X factors that we saw in the Lok Sabha, particularly in the areas where Ajit Pawar was a factor, primarily in Western Maharashtra, where the BJP clearly lost ground in that election. But that doesn't apply only to the NCP, Rahul. It also applies to whether a Shiv Sena voter, an Uddhav Sena voter, for example, will transfer their votes to the Congress. What we saw in the Lok Sabha was Congress voters, particularly Muslims, Dalits, even Adivasis, transferred their votes to the Shiv Sena, Muslims and Dalits in large numbers. Will that happen in a Vidhan Sabha? That's where the hyper-localization comes. You see, the local factors, Rahul, are so overwhelming because each candidate almost is like a local dada. And therefore comes along with 40,000-50,000 votes of his or her on their own. Doesn't even require a party symbol. I'm just in Ratnagiri and I was by the coastline meeting these Muslim fisher folk, all of whom said they'll vote for Uday Samant, who's the Shiv Sena Shinde group leader. I think the challenge for the BJP has been in the last few months to convince their voters to vote for Ajit Pawar and for Ajit Pawar to convince his voters to vote for the BJP, which is why you're right on batenge to katenge. Ajit Pawar, for example, has been very defensive because he knows in a number of constituencies there is a Muslim consolidation that will take place against him and his candidates, and that could cost him seats in certain parts of Western Maharashtra. So I think vote transfer is critical. It's a major factor, as is the rebel factor. So I think these are the two X factors that no pollster really beyond the point, Rahul, can actually capture. How many out of every 10 votes, how many will get transferred? You might get that in a post poll, but in a pre-poll, very difficult to get that because constituency by constituency, even in Ajit Pawar's so-called strongholds, there's no common narrative. I just heard Sahil talk about Ladki Bahim. While Ladki Bahim has certainly given the Mahayuti an important narrative that was resonating a lot, now I'm suddenly finding a lot of women talking about mehengai. You see that just post-Diwali prices went up. It couldn't have gone up at a worse time. So in the last 10, 12 days, a lot of the chatter when you talk to women is about how prices of cooking oil, for example, have gone up. So the same woman who says, yes, I'm happy that I've got Ladki Bahim, also says, but mahangai wadli hai. Prices have gone up. So how do you then gauge, which way the voter will go? It's very complex, very complicated. And unless Ladki Bahim becomes this sort of subtext across Maharashtra and undercurrent that captures even the floating voters, I think we're in for a real seat-by-seat contest in Maharashtra, Rahul, where, as you rightly said, vote transfer will be a major factor.
Sudhir Suryavanshi, during the Lok Sabha elections, we saw the Congress being able to transfer, or because of the presence of the Congress, the India Alliance being able to transfer Dalit and Muslim vote in particular to other non-Congress India Alliance partners. Whereas on the NDA side, because of the presence of Ajit Pawar, the ability to transfer votes wasn't quite the same, and that hurt the NDA's chances in the Lok Sabha elections. On the question of ability to seamlessly transfer votes from one party to the alliance candidate, who do you think at this time seems to have got better chemistry between voters who have allegiance to particular parties?
You see, Rahul, in Mahavikas Agadi, Uddhav Thackeray, after breaking with the BJP, he joined the hand with the Congress and united NCP. That time, many people of Uddhav Thackeray, his Shiv Sena has got the shock, and mostly Hindutva voter, and they later on shifted to BJP, and some of them were shifted to, Shinde Sena. But those who have remained with him in the Lok Sabha, I think they are stick with the Uddhav Thackeray. And the second point, in the Congress voter, like a Dalit, Muslim and Adivasi, they voted, we have seen in Mumbai, we have seen in many places, Muslims have no agitation to vote the Uddhav Thackeray. I spoke with many of the Muslim community people. They said Uddhav Thackeray is different than the Balasaheb Thackeray. Balasaheb Thackeray's politics was completely extremist Hindutva politics, but Uddhav Thackeray person is like a sober, he's a common man, he has done a lot of good work in the pandemic. So they don't see him as a extremist kind of Hindutva leader. They see him as an inclusive sort of the leader. So I don't find any difficulties in Mahavikas Agadi vote transferring. But at the same time, if you see in Mahayuti, Ajit Pawar has already raised his voice against the katenge to batenge, because Ajit Pawar, I think that he is also in the last leg of his political things. He has to also survive, not only survive, but bounce back. Then only his relevance will remain in the Maharashtra politics. Therefore, he is trying to keep his identity. Now, at the last moment, by raising such kind of issue, whether it will help or not help, the election result will tell. But other factor, what I feel everybody has talked, I think that, the independents and rebels.
Okay, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that in just a moment. Smaller parties, independents, rebels is one of my X factors. But I want to take that one scheme which everyone's been talking about. This is the Ladki Bahim scheme, modeled on, Ladli Bahim from Madhya Pradesh, which helped Shivraj Singh Chauhan and the BJP come back to power in the state of Madhya Pradesh. That time there were questions about whether it would be efficacious. We saw it was. We've seen this been implemented in Jharkhand as well, and therefore now in state after state, and the Congress is promising an even bigger allocation. When this question was asked that which scheme launched by the state government will attract voters, this is C-voter tracking data, 45% mentioned the Ladki Bahim scheme, whereas the other schemes like the Mahashepkari Yojana is only 10%, Lek Ladki is only 4%, Jan Arogya is only 8%, Aam Aadmi Awas Yojana is 2%, Madrasa modernization is 0.2%. So Sheila Bhatt, 45% saying Ladli Bahim is the one scheme that run by the state government that impacts them and could play a role in this election. But now it's been several tranches, so there's no novelty, and plus the Maha Vikas Aghadi is also promising the same scheme, in fact with a higher allocation, and therefore on the day of polling, how important a factor it continues to be in the minds of the voters, particularly women, then becomes very important, because it's now 3 or 4 tranches have come into your accounts. It's no longer as novel as it was when it was first introduced after the Lok Sabha elections.
Yeah. Hi, Rahul. Rahul, we must understand that this is a very unique, one of its kind election, which is a kind of a panchayat election with a national consequences. And it's really one of the most confusing elections, assembly elections India ever saw. Maharashtra got statehood in 1960, but everybody who has covered these elections will say that more than six big parties and 4 small parties, including Muslim, OBC, Dalit, tribal parties, they are all having their stakes. And I think this election, women voters will make definitely some difference, because both the parties and at individual level also, because as I said, this election has a texture of a panchayat election, so women voters will make a difference. And more importantly, I think the major fight is between, though they are not saying, and not many analysts are saying this, but how I see it, I see this as a BJP putting its best foot forward to become a single largest party, and Congress has to ensure less and BJP below 100, because I think this Maharashtra will be a turning point for a parliamentary politics. And that's why what Rahul Gandhi and Congress started with Bharat Jodo Yatra, one of the milestone will be Maharashtra election results.
That's an important point. Sheila saying that this is panchayat election in reality, even though it's supposed to be a Lok Sabha election, and that's an important point. I want to take now the 4th X factor, and this is to do with smaller parties, independents. Now remember, this was very crucial in Haryana, where you had a lot of these independents, rebels, who ultimately queered the pitch. So if you look at past data, it's been counter to what we're expecting to happen in this election. If you see from 2009 to 2019, the vote share of smaller parties, these independents, rebels, actually came down. It was 32.3% earlier. It came down to 24.3% in 2019. So on a historic time graph, the seats won by independents and smaller parties was coming down in Maharashtra. The vote share was also coming down. Rajdeep, to what extent do you think it could change in this assembly election? You saw how independents and rebels threw asunder some of the calculations in Haryana. How is that factor, which is likely to be even bigger in Maharashtra, likely to play out on the 23rd?
It'll play out hugely, Rahul, because the difference between 2019 and 2024 is the politics of Maharashtra is even more fragmented. Sheila Bhatt is right. It's not just a panchayat; it's a municipalization of elections, where every election, as I said, seat by seat is being fought. So in every seat where you have a strong independent or a small party, that completely changes everyone's electoral calculations. You just mentioned an X factor called Ladki Bahim. Yes, that's a narrative and it's resonating, and it can give the edge to the Mahayuti, but at the same time, there are two other X factors that are often not discussed. One, as I mentioned a little while earlier, is Mehengai. I'm hearing this time and again, particularly among women. But importantly, 70 seats in Maharashtra are decided by what soya bean farmers decide. And if there is one group, along with the Marathas, that need to be looked at closely, it is the soya bean farmers of Vidarbha and Marathwada.
What are they saying? Which way are they likely to go?
You see, that just as Ladki Bahim is the big advantage for the Mahayuti, soya bean prices not being remunerative is a huge advantage to the Mahavikas Aghadi. This is not an election, Rahul, where Rahul Gandhi is making a huge mistake by talking about constitution. Constitution doesn't resonate. No one here at the moment is talking at all about Samvidhan. But the supporters of the MVA in Vidarbha and in Marathwada are talking about soya bean prices. Similarly, no one really is talking about Hindu-Muslim outside a few big cities and on media channels. On the ground, the Mahayuti supporters are talking about the fact that Eknath Shinde has given them these welfare schemes. So actually, I think in the next week, who is able to push that agenda stronger? The welfare schemes of the Eknath Shinde government, he's got the first mover advantage on Ladki Bahim, versus the Mahavikas Aghadi talking about Mehengai. The cooking oil, sometimes, as I say, soya bean is the political crop of this election. People don't know this, but soya bean covers more hectares of Maharashtra's acreage than sugarcane or cotton that are often talked about. So soya bean is one big issue, and Mehengai when it comes to cooking oil. I've been doing a spot survey of Ladki Bahim everywhere. The women smile, say, great, we've got it. And I think it's the credit of the Eknath Shinde government that they've managed to get the delivery right. However, the same woman will then, just as I'm leaving, tell me, but Mahangai wadli hai. And what is the use of giving us something on one hand and taking it with the other? Now, I don't know whether this is going to resonate enough to decide voter preferences, Rahul, but I think the smaller parties, only where the candidates are very strong, will actually make a difference. There are about 25 to 30 independents and smaller parties who are poised to win. That's a lot. That's about over 10% and a little more than what happened in 2019. If that happens, then Maharashtra is heading for a potential hung assembly. And I can tell you that the likes of Sharad Pawar and a few BJP leaders are in touch with some of the independents likely to win. Let me give you a good example is Hitendra Thakur's VBA. They're almost certain to get 3 seats. BVA. So the BVA is likely to get 3 seats in the Palghar area. So you've got someone like that. Those 3 seats become precious. MIM could win 2. So you've got those smaller parties, but you've got about 25 independents who are denied tickets. And I think one of the big mistakes, Rahul, the Congress made is they perhaps gave too many tickets to the Shiv Sena, 15, 20 extra in Vidarbha, where the Shiv Sena really doesn't have the kind of candidates who might win. These are the factors I think that will make a difference. Some are suggesting maybe Ajit Pawar got 10 to 15 more seats than the BJP should have given him. And eventually the BJP has put up some of their own candidates on Ajit Pawar's symbol. I mean, it's crazy what's happening in Maharashtra. I'll give you a classic example, finally, on a management issue. Anil Deshmukh, the former Home Minister of Maharashtra, is a strongman in a constituency in Vidarbha. What has happened is not only is he fighting the BJP, he's fighting an NCP Ajit Pawar candidate whose name is also Anil Deshmukh. NCP Ajit Pawar, apparently at the prodding of the BJP, took up a farmer whose name is Anil Deshmukh, and he's got the official clock symbol. Now, please think about it. This is the management and the last mile, the sort of manipulation, in a way you could call it, of election, or the strategies that are going to make a huge difference in the end. Suppose that guy picks up 3,000 votes and Mr. Deshmukh struggles. Who knows how these independents and smaller parties, therefore, will affect the fortunes of the big parties.
Yeah, that's the point, that you could be looking at the big picture and something's happening on the ground which completely changes the end outcome. I want to go across to Sahil on the role of these smaller parties, the independents, the rebels. Sahil, who do you think has been able to handle rebels better? Who's been able to call back the candidature of more rebels? whose rebels are more threatening in terms of hurting the official alliances, and the role of the smaller parties and which way they could cut into the vote. Sahil.
Okay, we'll have to look at the smaller parties in a way where we should see whether they were there during the Lok Sabha elections or not. So if you look at the Lok Sabha elections, most of the smaller parties, MNS was absolutely not there. The party was directly supporting the Mahayuti. The other smaller parties, VBA, Prakash Ambedkar's Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi, which had its candidates, but it couldn't impact the result of the Lok Sabha election. The third one, of course, is MIM, which they put up the candidates in some of the seats, but again, their candidates made not even a minor impact in the Lok Sabha elections. Now let's come to the assembly elections. Now all three of them are in the fray. In places like I mentioned Sangola, where the parties like PWP have also put up the candidate against the Mahavikas Aghadi, even though PWP is part of the Mahavikas Aghadi. And then there are two additional smaller parties which formed a kind of an alliance just before the assembly election. One is Sambhaji Raje Chhatrapati, son of Shahu Chhatrapati, the member of parliament from Congress from Kolhapur, along with the smaller segments like Raju Shetty and others, and they have formed this alliance. Then there is a Bachchu Kadu, who has formed part of Mahayuti, and he has also formed a smaller segment in specifically region like Vidarbha. So in every segment of Maharashtra, there are smaller parties which will have kind of an impact. Now, how these smaller parties are being used? There is a fight within the alliances. Like, say, for an example, there is Mahayuti, but there is a tacit understanding between the BJP and Raj Thackeray, and it can be clearly seen when Raj Thackeray's son was filled in Bahim by MNS. The BJP leaders came forward and started saying that Eknath Shinde should be supporting Raj Thackeray's son and shouldn't put a candidate there. But that did not happen.
Okay.
But at many of the seats, I know for sure, in Mumbai or in subsequent regions where the BJP voters may turn towards MNS. On the other hand, if you look at, say, MIM or Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi, their vote base has been completely taken over by either Uddhav Thackeray or the Congress. So they will not have this kind of impact they used to have during 2019 election. So every small parties will have
some impact or the other. Okay, since I'm running out of time, I want to take you through our last X factor very quickly, which is to do with Gujarat versus Maharashtra. Remember, you've got the India Alliance trying to play up this allegation that a lot of businesses are moving from Maharashtra to Gujarat, a lot of incoming FDI projects like Foxconn, like Airbus, Tata, that they're being nudged towards Gujarat. Now, Sheila Bhatt, this is an effort to put the BJP on the defensive, that they're taking everything towards Gujarat, but the recent data suggests that actually under the Eknath Shinde government, the maximum amount of FDI has actually come into Maharashtra. Now it's really about political narrative, mahal, and what people believe. How do you see this Gujarat versus Maharashtra factor play out in this assembly election?
Right. So, Rahul, this is a serious issue, and it is a problem for, it's an image issue that affects BJP's image, and particularly I can imagine how Fadnavis must be struggling to give arguments that no, our business has not gone to Gujarat, but which is not a fact. But I think the way this election is going on is without any ideologies, without any such particular loyalties. In this election, the Maharashtra versus Gujarat has not become an issue. As Raddeep has very well put it up, and Sahil also, that this is a very different election, is a very confusing election, even for netas, not just for Praja. So I think this very important issue, X factor, but it is not playing out against anybody or for anybody, because the issues are different. And secondly, what I am knowing and I'm reading about Gujaratis of Mumbai, which are an important voters group, they are all largely for BJP.
Okay, I'll leave it there. We may not have been able to stick our necks out and tell you who we think is winning, but we heard the conversation this past half hour.